Bom dia.
Super lindo o teu desenho lá, a história.
Ah, obrigada.
E as pressas, aquelas coisas.
Eu fiz pensando no senhor.
Porque
Mambekor Change laughter, six so Guru Pema Siji Home Jane No Chance San Pema Gesadampo Lion Sing Again, under my Jonas, Kurdu Kandam Mante Koranjin Jesudan Change Lapton Sexus So Guru Pema Sinji Home Home Jane Nam Chan San Pema Gesan Jampo La Dara Purdu Kandram Ampe Koran Jinjin Jesu Dadu E Chingjin Labte Sexus So Guru Pema Sinji Home Sanje Chanda Nang Lan Jan Chu Bardu Dani Chamisun Chi Dangi Jing Sun Ji Pe So Nan Chi Lula Penji Sanje So Sanje Chodan Sunchi Chonang Wan Janchu Bardu Dani Chavsun Chi Jin Sun Ji Pe Sun Nan Chi Drula Penji Sanje Drupa Su Sanje Chodan Chonang Lan Janchu Bardu Dani Chavsun Chi Dagi Jin Sun Ji Pe So Nan Chi Drula Penji Sanje Drupa So Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum Om Hum Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum Om Hum Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum Om Hum Belzara Sidi Hum Om Hum Belzara Guru Pema 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 Sidi Hum Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om Belzara Om Ha Om Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Om Ha Om 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 Belzara Guru Pema Sidi Hum. Ga te para ga te para san ga te bunji so ha ga Paraga Parasanga Punji Sohangate Gate Paraga Parasanga Bunji Sohanga Gante Paragate Parasanga Bunji Sohangate Aragante Parasangante Jeso Gate Paragate Parasangate Jesohanga Tegate Paragate Bunji Sohao Gante Gate Paragate. Sangha Tembo Jin So Hawan Gante Gante Para Gante Para Sangate Bunjin So Hawan Gante Para Gante Para Sangate Bunjin Gante Gante Para Gante Para Sangha Tembundi Sohanga Gante Paragate Rasangate Bunji So Bom dia.
Good morning. So today in the morning we will start studying the Diamond Sutra. I hope we can conclude the study during these days. Usually in this period from the 1st to the 8th of December, we always study this sutra. This sutra it belongs to the Prajna Paramita literature. This literature encompasses many sutras, and one of the sutras is the Diamond Sutra. It describes essentially the 6 perfections. So it's very interesting because it's the ability of moving in the world. It's as if it were the Heart Sutra, but when we do this practice, we're now able to walk in the world based on the 6 perfections. So there are 6 qualities, and these qualities become perfections because generosity, morality, peace, energy, and wisdom, they are qualities, but they are not necessarily perfections. So when these qualities, they have the view of emptiness, I mean, we are operating in these qualities based on a non-contrived basis, which is from where the Prajna Paramita is enunciated. Generosity, for example, is different because we have a sense of an identity. So if someone is generous, so there's somebody who is generous, and there's somebody who benefits from this generosity, and there is something that is offered. However, here we have overcome the notion of identity as an object. So how come are we going to be generous and keeping this broad view? So this is the perfection of generosity. Then there's morality. We have the feeling that there's somebody performing a certain quality in the relationship with other beings. How can we do this if reality is empty and non-dual? So the qualities themselves are perceived as luminous constructions. So how can we practice morality within a view that is beyond identities and ignorance? And the same applies to the other perfections. These 6 qualities become 6 perfections when we contemplate them based on the view of emptiness. But the view of emptiness is not a particular view, it's not a theory. It's actually the view that originates when we are based on the primordial mandala, when we are based on the experience of the non-contrived mind. Usually, we think that generosity is something that, and then we have a number of referentials to describe generosity. But these referentials are a contrived, an artificial basis. How can we practice generosity without a contrived basis? This is the point. How can we relate to beings that are on conditioned basis? So this is the point that we're gonna train. So I'm presenting it like this, but that's not how it's presented. Buddha has a very direct way of presenting this. So this is our challenge.
No mundo,
And
né?
this is the challenge of action in the world. So having understood the first, second, and second views, now we have the third view that propels us to act within the world.
Correspondentes ao Sutra do Diamante.
The texts that correspond to the Diamond Sutra,
Tive conhecimento, eles são muito parecidos.
the texts that I have studied are very similar. So here I'm using an old translation,
Que aconteceu assim.
just because it happened in this way, just because I was introduced to the Diamond Sutra through 2 old translations. They are academic translations, and I think they're very well done.
Fazer efetivamente uma crítica que eu acho
Never been able to actually criticize them because I think they're very good.
e as traduções mais recentes, elas
And
também
the more recent translations are also very similar. So I'm not gonna substitute. I'm using Dwight Goddard's translation.
foi publicado num tempo antigo. Assim.
This translation was published many years ago,
Eu fui trabalhando ela ao longo dos tempos.
and I have worked on this text, translated it into Portuguese, and contemplated and meditated on it.
Traduções, né?
I mean, I can, of course, work with other translations. There isn't a big difference, but here I'm explaining why I'm using this specific translation. And you don't need to only use this translation. You can use other translations if you want. I don't know if this text is available. Yes, yeah, it's going to be posted. It's going to be posted on the website. So, yeah, people will have access to the text.
Mas a sanga resolve tudo, pessoal. Tudo mágico. No fim, é tudo resolve.
But the Sangha solves everything. Everything is magic. Somebody will solve this issue. My life is easy.
Também com respeito a Carol que está traduzindo, eu não sei.
Also, Carol, I had
Fotografar, mandar para ti esse texto que eu utilizei, né? Mas isso eu não fiz, não lembro.
Lama is asking about the text in English.
Não sei se tu tem o texto. Tem, né? Então tá. A sangue é isso. É o próprio Buda, tá tudo resolvido.
Yes. So we have the text in English as well.
Então a gente começa com uma prece, né?
So we begin with a prayer, which usually is said before the Dharma, incomparably profound and mysterious, is rarely found even in hundreds and thousands of universal cycles.
Nós agora facultado vê-lo.
It's given to us the possibility to listen to it, accept it, and keep it. May we be able to really understand the Tathagata's words. It's very difficult to penetrate the appearances by ourselves. So when we penetrate the appearances, the Dharma appears, and this is very rare. At the end of the text, there is a dedication. May the virtues that result from reading this sutra reach all the sentient beings so that they follow with us the Buddha's path.
O texto começa com uma introdução.
So the text begins with an introduction. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Lord Buddha was sojourning in the kingdom of Shravasti, staying in the Jetavana grove, which Anathapindika had given to the Brotherhood, and with him were assembled 1,250 experienced bhikshus.
Então, os bhikshus são aqueles que
So bhikshus are those who use meditation and inner contemplation to break through appearances.
aproximam a hora da
As the
refeição.
hour drew near for the morning meal, the Lord Buddha and his disciples put on their street robes and carrying their alms bowls went toward the city of Shravasti and begged their food from door to door. After they had returned to the Jeta Grove, they laid aside their street garments, bathed their feet, partook of the morning meal, put away their begging bowls for another day, and afterward seated themselves about the Lord Buddha. So this was their daily lives. They didn't really have a kitchen. They used to eat once a day, and then they would put away their begging bowls, and yeah. So they didn't have supermarkets and all these issues. The Venerable Shupuchi rose from his seat in the midst of the assembly, arranged his robes, so the right shoulder was exposed. So since those times we have been wearing these robes in this way with the right shoulder exposed, but they didn't wear a shirt. He kneeled his right knee, pressed the palms of his hands together, and bowing respectfully to the Lord Buddha, said, Tathagata, honored of the worlds, our beloved Lord, may thy mercy be upon us to take good care of us and to give us good instruction. So Tathagata is the ninth stage of the Bodhisattvas.
Compreensão, tem o sexto
The
estágio.
Tathagata, so there is a sixth stage, which is a complete understanding of all things, and then in the seventh stage, it's always possible to evoke wisdom and lucidity in front of the obstacles, and then in the eighth stage, this lucidity is never lost. It's always completely present, and it's always recognized in the multiple appearances. There's no longer distraction. And then in the ninth stage, this becomes a fruition. So there is no effort, and we don't enter delusion anymore. We're moving within the mandala in a completely light way, without creating imaginations, fabrications, mental states. We're always seeing things as they are. So this is the Tathagata. But the Tathagata is present in a body. It's in a specific place. In the 10th stage, there's no longer a body. So Tathagata, honored of the world, our beloved Lord, may thy mercy be upon us to take good care of us and to give us good instruction. The Lord Buddha replied to Subhuti, saying, indeed, I will take good care of every bodhisattva mahasattva and give them the best of instruction. So you should see it in this way. The Sangha completely calm and focused in deepening their view, and then in front of them under a tree, the Buddha is seated as a Tathagata that has the complete view and who sees everything clearly. So they have the extraordinary opportunity of asking the Tathagata for help. So they sit around the Tathagata, they walk around the Tathagata 3 times, they do the prostrations, and they request, please help us. May thy mercy be upon us to take good care of us and to give us good instruction. So this is wonderful. The Lord Buddha replied to Subhuti, saying, indeed, I will take good care of every bodhisattva mahasattva and give them the best of instruction. So if the Buddha said this, that's exactly what he's going to do. Subhuti replied, honored of the worlds, we're very glad to listen to thy blessed instruction. Tell us what we shall say when good, pious men and women come to us inquiring how they should begin the practice of seeking to attain highest perfect wisdom. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi.
Ou seja, a própria visão.
That is the ultimate view of the Buddhas, the view that penetrates appearances and sees everything as it is. What shall we tell them? How are they to quiet their drifting minds and subdue their craving thoughts? So you can see that the diagnosis is the same. Drifting minds and craving thoughts. All is the same diagnosis. The Lord Buddha replied to Subhuti, saying, you have made a good request, Subhuti. Listen carefully, and I'll answer your question, so that all the brotherhood will understand. As good and pious men and women come to you, wishing to begin the practice of seeking to attain highest perfect wisdom, they will simply have to follow what I am about to say to you. And very soon they will be able to subdue their discriminative thoughts and craving desires, and will be able to attain perfect tranquility of mind. So here we're already contemplating this craving desires. This is dependent arising. When we take something as a basis and then we create something else, and etc. There's an energy operating in this. And now he describes the practice of charity, the Dana Paramita. Then the Lord Buddha addressed the assembly. Everyone in the world, beginning with the highest Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, should follow what I'm going to teach you. For this teaching will bring deliverance to everyone.
Ele vai descrever os seres dos vários reinos.
So here he will describe the beings of all the realms, whether hatched from an egg or formed in a womb, or evolved from a spawn, or produced by metamorphosis, with or without form. So here are the realms, with and without form, possessing mental faculties or devoid of mental faculties, or both devoid and not devoid, or neither devoid or not devoid,
Todos serão conduzidos.
and lead them toward perfect nirvana.
Então aqui tem uma parte no Sutra
So here, there's an excerpt in the Surangama Sutra in which the Buddha describes this, and we studied this last year.
detalhar essas
I'm not gonna give details here, but there's an excerpt in the Surangama Sutra that talks about the levels of beings, the 12 classes of beings,
que é o que ele está explicando.
which is what the Buddha is explaining here.
Então pensem que isso
So
corresponde
essentially, you could think that this corresponds to the beings of the three worlds. The world of desire, which is where we are,
da forma e o mundo.
the form world, and the formless world.
Apesar dos seres
Though
sensoriais,
the sentient beings, thus to be delivered by me, are innumerable
sem limite,
and without limit, yet in reality, there are no sentient beings to be delivered.
então a gente já começou com o estilo que o Buda vai utilizar.
So here we have already been introduced to the style of the Buddha. He will always be working with this, like this is, this isn't, this is, which is the approach of Maitreya. It's an approach of emptiness.
Vai dar benefícios, vai
So Buddha will benefit and take care of all the disciples and etc. But it's still those that are taking care.
Qual é a substancialidade dele? Né? Substancialidade dele,
They have no substantiality.
a grande espacialidade, luminosidade,
Their substantiality is the great openness, the speciality, the great luminosity,
toda inocência.
and self-awareness.
Mas isso não é uma identidade.
But this is not an identity. This is not someone. And how does someone arise? It arises as a mental construction together with the process of dependent arising that creates a path. And how do we see this?
Nas múltiplas identidades que nós
We recognize ourselves in the various identities that we felt we were at some point, but now we don't feel like that anymore. So we have been babies, children, we have done several things as adults. We have tried so many things. We have had different routines. Today, those routines and those mental paths, they have no meaning anymore. We're doing other things. So when we describe ourselves, we're describing ourselves in a different way. So these beings that are now in front of the Buddha requesting for his help, or any other being who will need Buddha's help, they are beings of this kind. They are constructions that arise within mental flows. So today they're suffering, and then tomorrow they will disappear and they will arise in a different way. So it's in this sense that Buddha says,
os bodhisattvas mahasattvas ao ensinar o Dharma
the Bodhisattvas Mahasattvas, when they teach Dharma to others, so they are manifesting as a Nirmanakaya emanation. They are this nature that is free, completely lucid, and manifests a body that is visible to other beings and produces sounds that other beings can understand. So it's essential that the Bodhisattvas Mahasattvas that manifest in this way,
manifestação perfeita.
they must become a perfect manifestation so that they can bring about benefit. If they are not a perfect manifestation, if they are identities, this is already not so good. If they are identities, they are within the rule of life, so they have favorable periods and they have hell periods. They will go round and round. They are fixated. So the Buddha says, he gives these immediate instructions. So the Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the Nirmanakayas were completely inseparable from the Buddha himself. They are emanations of the Buddha. Should follow what I'm going to teach you. So, sorry. Moreover, Shubut, the Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, in teaching the Dharma to others, should first be free themselves. So they should free themselves from all the craving thoughts awakened by beautiful sights. This is Mara. So we have the impulse to create benefit to beings, but then Mara appears and says, I'm going to build a temple somewhere for you. I will make it easy for you. I'll put everything on the internet. Many people will come and then you're going to be able to bring benefit to many people. So these are beautiful sights. And then we start to see realities in a causal way. And when we have this causal view, then we get confused. So the Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, in teaching the Dharma to others, should first be free themselves from all the craving thoughts awakened by beautiful sights, anything that looks like a great opportunity or something favorable. Pleasant sounds, sweet tastes, fragrance, soft tangibles, and seductive thoughts. All of this is Mara. So Mara comes and seduces the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. The Bodhisattva Mahasattva is in Tushita and Mara is one realm above Tushita. So why are Bodhisattvas Mahasattvas susceptible to Mara? Because they have the desire to free beings. They're still manifesting in a flow of dependent arising. It's as if they had a path. So if they have a path, there will always someone who will show up and say, I am going to help you in this path. And then we can say, oh yes, Mara, you're very welcome. So it's easy for us to get fixated. And then Buddha says, and why? Because if in their practice of charity, the practice to benefit beings, they are uninfluenced by such things. Which things? Impulses, or the feeling that there are good opportunities, the sensation. Because if in their practice they are uninfluenced by such things, they will realize a blessing and merit that is inestimable and inconceivable. So they are not imprisoned in circumstances that look favorable or unfavorable. They proclaim the Dharma as it appears, and that's it. What do you think, Shibut? Is it possible to estimate the distance of space in the eastern heavens? So this is always very profound. Buddha will have to make this question many times. So we look to the east, and then we look towards east, and we realize that the mind can reach something that has no content and has no dimension. And then I see the mind reaching things that have no content and no dimension. It's like the Buddha introducing the mind that is completely free. Because I look at an object and it's nothing. So while I'm seeing this object that is nothing, my mind goes to this vast space. So I have a direct experience of the liberated nature of mind. And I have an experience of what Buddha is saying here. And then Subhuti says, no, blessed one, it's impossible to estimate the distance of space in the eastern heavens. Subhuti, is it possible to estimate the limits of space in the northern, southern, and western heavens, or to any of the four corners of the universe, or above or below? No, honor of the worlds. Subhuti, is it equally impossible to estimate the blessing and merit that will come to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva who practices charity uninfluenced by any of these arbitrary conceptions? So the blessings and merit, they belong to this great expanse, to this great freedom of the mind. They cannot be counted in numbers. So it's impossible to estimate the blessing and merit that will come to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva who practices charity uninfluenced by any of these arbitrary conceptions. This truth should be taught in the beginning to everybody. So it's as if the Buddha were looking towards the front. The Buddha is in front of us and looking ahead. Everything that he encounters, he understands very clearly how those things are constructed and gets intertwined, but he doesn't think about it. He sees it directly. He is completely liberated in this illimited space. And here he doesn't enter particular states. If Mara shows up and says, oh, if you do this, you're going to be successful, you're going to be recognized, this doesn't really make any sense, because the teaching and the benefit that Buddha can bring to beings is to maintain this vast view. And in this vast view, this is the benefit. The benefit has nothing to do with getting attached with something that is conditioned. And Mara is the one who offers something that usually hooks the Bodhisattva.
O senhor Buda continuou. O que pensa, Sr. Budi? Se discípulo oferecesse
So Lord Buddha
uma tal quantidade
went on.
capaz de preencher os bilhões de universos, haveria ele de receber dessa forma consideráveis bênçãos e méritos? Então, aqui é assim, quando
Sorry, I got a little bit lost.
oferendas são oferecidas, são ofertadas,
So here, when the offerings are made,
reais, assim,
they are the real offerings. They are the offerings that we offer to the gods. So anything that gods consider favorable. So we offer the 7 treasures, and there's nothing more, nothing higher in the world than offering the 7 treasures.
então, ele oferece esses 7 tesouros.
So he offers the 7 treasures, and this
Fazendo isso,
pervades billions of universes. And once we're doing this to all beings in all directions, we'll naturally receive the blessing and merit of this, because we're bringing benefit to beings. We're offering what beings aspire the most.
o Buda replicou. Honrado
Shubut replied, honored of the world, such a disciple would acquire a very considerable blessing.
o senhor Buda disse.
The Lord Buddha said, Subhuti, if such a blessing and merit had any substantiality, if it was anything other than a mere expression,
O Tathagata
the
não
Tathagata would not have used the words blessing and merit.
aqui, ele está retirando
So here Buddha is taking away the substantiality of blessing and merit. He says that this vast view that is presented by the Prajnaparamita teaching or the Diamond Sutra, it's inconceivable, it's beyond any blessing and merit that may be offered. So blessing and merit belong to the world, to samsara. It's not possible to take blessing and merit and break through samsara. Blessing and merit only take us to different places within samsara. So there isn't actually anything behind the expression blessing and merit. What think you, Shibuchi? Are the atoms of dust that comprise the 3,000 great universes very numerous? So, atoms of matter. It's as if there was this notion that the whole universe is comprised by many, many big things that are small things that are indivisible and get together and they create the whole world, like the Greek used to think. So what think you, Shibuchi? Are the atoms of dust that comprise the 3,000 great universes very numerous? Very numerous indeed, blessed Lord. Shibuchi, when the Tathagata speaks of atoms of dust, it does not mean that he has in mind any definite or arbitrary conception. He merely uses the words as a figure of speech. So here again, the Buddha is talking about prakriti, which is matter in Sanskrit. So when he's talking about the atoms of matter, he's not ascribing any kind of substantiality to this. He's just referring to this as people in their confusion usually consider it. And then at some point he says that he talks about many things that beings see, but they are mere figures of expression. They're just ways of communicating. But Lord Buddha never thinks that those things are truly existent. Sometimes when he talks about these things, people may think that he's affirming their existence, but actually he's not doing that. It's just a method of communication. So, what thinks you, Shibuchi, are the atoms of dust that comprise the 3,000 great universes very numerous? Very numerous indeed. Shibuchi, when the Tathagata speaks of atoms of dust, it does not mean that he has in mind any definite or arbitrary conception. So he's not fixated on any idea. He merely uses the words as a figure of speech. It's just the same with the words, the great universes. They do not assert any definite or arbitrary idea. He merely uses the words as words. So it doesn't mean that he's saying that there are great, like billions of universes. He's not talking about universes in this way. But this is the way people see it. So he communicates with beings within the world. He explains what Nirmanakaya does. He's explaining what the body and the speech, how the mind and body and speech operate in the illusory world. So he communicates with beings through illusory sounds, but he doesn't attribute any real meaning to that. Why does he say this? Because, for example, when we talked about how the Samantabhadra teachings originate, Samantabhadra teachings have no words and no meanings. It's just a direct view. So this is Samantabhadra.
visão
Samantabhadra is this naturally present view, which is Rigpa, within a vast expanse that is luminous and has no content. So from this presence, this is the view of Samantabhadra in itself.
todas as manifestações
And all manifestations are naturally the luminous expression of Samantabhadra's mind. But there is no reasoning, no thinking like, oh, I almost got lost and etc. There is no consciousness thinking about this. So this is symbolized by Vajrasattva consort, completely inseparable. But since beings arise from this and they create a limited self-awareness, suffering originates. And then Vajrasattva is this profound awareness that sees the mistake in the constructions. And then in this way, Samantabhadra generates Vajrasattva who clarifies everything. So Vajrasattva takes the appearance and makes the appearance go back to this primordial aspect. So he clarifies and liberates the appearance. And this is the recognition of the natural perfection of appearances. But here, in this case, there is an appearance, but beings are not able to understand it. So even though the Vajrasattva mind is present within all of the confused beings, they're not able to see it. So Vajrasattva has to produce Garabdorji's emanation. And then Garabdorji comes and he speaks. He produces words. So here Buddha is operating on this level. He's producing words, he manifests the body, and this is Nirmanakaya. So Vajrasattva is like a level of Sambhogakaya. He has the understanding. But even though this understanding is present in every being, in the same way that Samantabhadra is present in everything is an expression of Samantabhadra, and Vajrasattva that can produce the complete liberation is also in all beings. But beings cannot see it because they are following mental trajectories, so they don't see it. So Garabdorji needs to arise. He is emanated from the Samogakaya aspect and arises as a body aspect, and then he comes and says, hey beings, look at me. So he has to arise in an extraordinary way because it's quicker. He's born as an extraordinary baby and is still very young. He can see things that make people feel admiration. So people pay attention to him. And then eventually he encounters Manjushri Mitra, who represents the karma teachings and teachings related to Shamatha. So they have this debate, and Manjushri Mitra becomes a student of Garabdorji. But Garabdorji represents view, meditation, action, fruition. If we only keep these four words, view, meditation, action, and fruition, which are the four views, if we only contemplate this, so what's happening? When these four words are enunciated, they can be enunciated in Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, Parsi, in all the multiple languages, Hindi. But if they say them in Hindi, I cannot understand them. If they speak in any other language that is not Portuguese, then we cannot understand it. So how do we understand this in Portuguese language? We understand it because we have a decodifier that attributes meaning to sounds. But okay, what about these meanings? Do I really understand the meaning? Where do they come from? Those meanings come from the karmic structures, from the common experiences that we had. They don't come from anywhere else. So there's a karmic decodifier that I used to deal with ordinary things. And then Dorji comes and he says that which can be understood in this ordinary place. And then he takes these karmic meanings and propels them towards a view that connects with our inner Vajrasattva, our inner guru. And then the inner guru says, oh, finally words that make sense. So now you can understand it. So there is an inner awareness, which is actually Vajrasattva, enhanced by karmic sounds, which are codified karmically, but they are not activating a karmic wisdom. They're actually activating Vajrasattva's wisdom, which is the inner guru. So this inner guru produces the understanding, and that's how the benefit takes place. So this is our situation. So even though Buddha says things like dust or particles of dust, these are words that belong to the conventional world. It's like that Dorji talking to beings, but he uses conventional words in the conventional world. But based on that, he creates a connection with our dimension of inner wisdom. So he activates a karmic door to connect and awake that which we call the inner master, which is the Buddha, the Vajrasattva, and Samantabhadra, Kuntuzampu, who are inseparable from ourselves. But if any good and pious disciple, man or woman, for the sake of charity, has been sacrificing his or her life. Let me go back a little bit. Shubhuti, when the Tathagata speaks of atoms of dust, it does not mean that he has in mind any definite or arbitrary conception. He merely uses the words as a figure of speech. But there is a result. It's just the same with the words, the great universes. They do not assert any definite or arbitrary idea. He merely uses the words as words. Shubhuti, if any good and pious disciple, man or woman, for the sake of charity, has been sacrificing his or her life for generation after generation, as many as the grains of sand in the 3,000 great universes. So they created causal movements within the world, trying to create benefit to beings, but they are causal benefits. And another disciple has been simply studying and observing even one stanza of this scripture and explaining it to others. His blessing and merit will be far greater. What think you, Shubhuti? Why is it far greater? Because, for example, if we're giving objective gifts or practicing an objective charity or generosity, we're not actually propelling a transformation of the other beings' consciousness that will bring them beyond the limited understanding that they have of the world. We are simply talking with those people in the way that in the limited way that they see themselves. I don't think it's a problem. It's not a problem. It creates merit. So, for example, if we do it, there's a level of trust. And then later, if we say other things based on this trust, these people can understand it. So I think this bond is very interesting, but it's not enough. This is the point. one example of how ordinary words can produce a transformation. So someone comes and says, "Oh, I'm feeling so bad. I have such and such problem." And then we tell them, "Okay, so now describe your emotions and what you're feeling." And they describe like the whole thing. With these words that we may consider that refer to limited situations and imprisoning understandings, like the person is describing their prison and how they feel delacerated and burning within that. With the same words, we can try and find the place where these things are turned on and turned off. For example, it would be interesting for people to understand that even though they are suffering, they are not always suffering, which is a little bit paradoxical. So let's imagine that someone had a great loss in their lives. So there are moments when these people get distracted of the great loss. They are not burning all the time. So even though they are burning, it doesn't happen all the time. They're not 100% of the time burning. So we can think, how can this horrible experience arise and then eventually it alleviates and then ceases? And if we contemplate this, we can try and see how does it happen. And then we will reach the conclusion that suffering has some intense moments. There are moments when it disappears. But if I intensify the period in which it disappears and etc., I'm using the same words that have to do with suffering, but I'm actually focusing on that which is behind all of that, and is this mind that is free, but I'm only using ordinary words. So this is what the Nirmanakaya does. They come to the world with body and they use ordinary words that are understood within the karmic flows, but they point out this unlimited aspect, this software of the comprehension of the unlimited aspect is Sambhogakaya. It's the mind with the abilities that it has. And the expression of this in the world is the Nirmanakaya aspect. If we look carefully, the Nirmanakaya aspect is not somebody. The Nirmanakaya aspect is a software. So the Buddha had 500 great disciples who reached the mind that he reached. This means that the Nirmanakaya of the Buddha manifested, multiplied by 500. Those other beings with other names and other appearances, they manifested in different places with the same level of understanding and ability that Buddha had. Why? Because all beings have Buddha nature. So they understood it and they reached this level. So we don't know anymore. So Buddha is the prince, or what is he? Well, he was a prince, but the prince was actually a way by which the primordial Buddha manifested himself. And the software is the same. So while different beings with different kinds of skin, gender, and etc., they manifest the same Sambhogakaya, the same comprehension, they are essentially the same Nirmanakaya. They are the same Sambhogakaya, the same Buddha mind. The external appearance is a little bit different, so we can say that they are different Nirmanakayas, but they're actually the same being. So, for example, there are the Buddha's disciples. So we can ask them, "Who are you?" And then they will tell the name of father and mother, etc. But they say, "No, I'm not this." So all great masters at a certain point said this horrible thing to their mothers: "I'm not your mother." So they disappear from home. They take a train, disappear, And then when they leave the train, they change their clothes, they go into a cave, and then the mother goes after them, and after a long time, she finds him, and he's sitting in a cave looking into the infinite. And when he, after a long time, like many years in silence, when he decided to speak, he said, "You are not my mother." I think this is very harsh. A Buddhist would never do that. No, I'm kidding. Well, Buddha didn't have this problem because his mother died after 1 week. So in psychoanalysis, we can say that he had an advantage. No, please, let's cut this part from the video. So, how is it that the Nirmanakaya doesn't feel that they belong to that? It's because they have this clarity. They are not based on what they learned or the family lineage. Siddhartha didn't become a king. It was offered to him, but King Bindusara said before he reached enlightenment, "Oh, I'm gonna divide my kingdom." But Siddhartha didn't accept. So Siddhartha was completely focused. He didn't invest in anything that had to do with samsara. Buddha is the eye that sees dependent arising in all direction and is free from all that. So when the great opportunities of Mara are seen, the Buddha recognizes dependent arising and doesn't get fixated, but he can penetrate this world and offer teachings to the beings that are in the world. He doesn't turn his back away, and he has the ability of penetrating the world. So this is wonderful, completely wonderful. And then we can encounter later Guru Rinpoche's teachings that come many centuries later. Guru Rinpoche comes around 14 centuries after Shakyamuni Buddha, and he represents a different approach, which is the tantric approach. It's the approach of the Mahasiddhas. The Mahasiddhas developed the extraordinary ability of penetrating the worlds of beings without belonging to those worlds. They developed this ability, which is the ability of the Nirmanakaya. So the main point of the Buddha's teaching has to do with karma and meditative equipoise. But the Mahasiddhas are later generations, so there was a maturity within the Sangha, and they developed other abilities. This ability to penetrate the world and not be dragged by appearances. So they do not reject contact with the world in order to stabilize the mind. They have already this ability, so they can penetrate the world and relate with beings. So they were the psychotherapists of those times.
Então, isso está nesse ambiente.
So, yeah. But for example, it's easy for us to get mistaken. We may think, oh, I have this ability. But when we penetrate the world, we see things, favorable things, unfavorable things. There are different flows of consciousness, and we don't have freedom regarding those things. But here, we are explaining what it's like to manifest the karmic aspect, to speak the ordinary words, and to understand that they are ordinary words, and to proclaim them like the Buddha does, but not getting fixated to this environment where the words make sense, but based on that to reveal the profundity of the real experience as it is. So that's why the sutra is so profound. We could say that this is a tantric aspect. So how the words themselves within the worlds, how do they take place within the worlds without rejecting appearances, mistaken appearances, but revealing this profound aspect. So, Shubut, if any good and pious disciple, man or woman, for the sake of charity, has been sacrificing his or her life for generation after generation, as many as the grains of sand in the 3,000 great universes, and another disciple has been simply studying and observing even one stanza of this scripture and explaining it to others, his blessing and merit will be far greater. What think you, Shubuchi? If a disciple bestowed in charity an abundance of the 7 treasures, sufficient to fill the 3,000 great universes, would there accrue to that person a considerable blessing and merit? Shubuchi replied, a very considerable blessing and merit. Blessing and merit that belong to the world. For example, they will have support, they will have less diseases, they will live longer, they will have more chances to be happy and avoid suffering. So, yeah, very considerable blessing and merit.
Ele não atribui qualquer valor objetivo.
And why? Because what the Lauder has referred to as blessing and merit does not refer to any objective value or quantity. He only refers to them in a relative sense. So, the Lord Buddha continued, if there is another disciple who, after studying and observing even a single stanza of this scripture, explain its meaning to others, his blessing and merit will be much greater. And why? Because from these explanations, Buddhas have attained Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, and their teachings are based upon the sacred scripture. So it was in this kind of openness and view from this that multiple Buddhas appeared throughout time.
Os Budas atingiram
From these explanations, Buddhas have attained Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, and their teachings are based upon this sacred scripture. But Shubuchi, as soon as I have spoken of these Buddhas and their dharmas, I must.
Então pronto, eu acabo de falar.
But Shubuchi, as soon as I have spoken of these Buddhas and their dharmas, I must recall the words, for there are no Buddhas and no dharmas. So here he spoils everything. So I was thinking that there were Buddhas and there were dharmas, but what he says is, Buddhas and dharmas are words that we use within the confused world. So because there is confusion, I talk about Buddhas. Because there is ignorance, I talk about dharma. But in the real, uncontrived, non-artificial environment, there are no Buddhas. Buddhas are names that we give to specific things that arise within samsara. And then we use this to have a quality control. The Lord Buddha then continued. The Buddha, the one who doesn't exist. When a Bodhisattva Mahasattva begins the practice of attaining Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, he must give up also all clinging to arbitrary conceptions about phenomena. Here we could say arbitrary conceptions about phenomena are form, perception, sensation, mental formation, and consciousness, and anything that is explained through Dharma, like suffering, causes of suffering, all of these aspects that are present in the Heart Sutra. Suffering, causes of suffering, ignorance, all the links until old age and death, and the very dissolution of old age and death, and also the sense of realization. Realization of what? So there's an identity that attains realization. So realization is the very dissolution of the sensation of an ordinary view. So he must also give up all clinging to arbitrary conceptions. So this clinging to arbitrary conceptions is an expression that substitutes the notion of emptiness. So if I talk about emptiness, it's as if I take away the substantiality of that thing. I take its reality, but it has a conventional reality. So I can't speak only of emptiness. I have to speak of emptiness and luminosity because it operates. So that's why Buddha says it.
Ele precisa abandonar toda ligação.
So he must also give up all clinging to arbitrary conceptions about phenomena. He's not imprisoned by this. He's able to move around amidst this without losing wisdom. When engaged in thinking, he should definitely exclude all thoughts connected with the phenomena of sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, and all discriminations based upon them.
Mantendo sua
Keeping
capacidade.
his thinking independent of all such arbitrary conceptions of phenomena. So here he's describing shamatha. That is, when engaged in thinking,
Ele está usando a mente.
so when using the mind, it should exclude all thoughts connected with the phenomena of sight. So there is sight. I see something, and this becomes a basis for a sequence of other things. So we don't do it. He doesn't do it. And neither with the objects of sound, taste, and all the physical senses. He does not do that. It means that he recoils from the 6 first consciousnesses.
Mantendo sua capacidade de pensar, ou seja,
Keeping his thinking, so keeping the activity of his mind independent of all such arbitrary conceptions of phenomena or luminous constructions that may arise. The mind is disturbed by these discriminations of sense concepts and the following arbitrary conceptions about them. So when something arises to the eyes,
conceito associado a isso.
there
Então,
is a correspondent conception, and the mind becomes conditioned to that appearance. So it has arbitrary conceptions. We start creating luminously other images, and the mind is disturbed and falls into false illuminations, false imaginations as to one's self and its relation to other selves.
essa razão,
It's for that reason that the Tathagata has constantly urged the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas in their practice of charity not to be influenced by any arbitrary conceptions of phenomena such as sights, sounds, and etc.
vocês imaginam, eles estão indo, eles vão
So they are offering something or offering the bowl that will receive the food, but this is considered a practice of generosity. That's incredible. Even though they are asking for food, this is a practice of generosity because it's an opportunity that they give to other people to generate merit.
se mantêm com essa posição.
So they maintain this mental position. So whether they have more food, less food, better or worse, they're actually beyond all of these thinking processes. So this is a practice that is beyond all of these discriminations. When they walk in the world, they naturally encounter all phenomena of sight, sounds, and etc. in mind. They encounter them, but they do not create any sequence. So this is how they maintain a lucidity like a pure shamatha amidst their movement in the world. This is the essence of the tantric practice.
Bodhisattva Mahasattva, para que em sua prática de generosidade não sejam perturbados por
It's for that reason that the Tathagata has constantly urged the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas in their practice of charity not to be influenced by any arbitrary conceptions of phenomena. What does it mean to be disturbed? To take something, this phenomena, as a basis for a chain of dependent arising. So they don't do it. The Bodhisattva Mahasattva should also bestow
preconceituosos com respeito a uma identidade.
Uninfluenced by any preconceived thoughts as to self and other selves. So they receive something and think, oh, this is a good person. So they are discriminating qualities. They are attributing qualities to a person to whom they give a name, but this belongs to a mental flow. And it's within these flows that identities arise, but identities have no substantiality. So uninfluenced by any preconceived thoughts as to self and other selves, and for the sole purpose of benefiting sentient beings. Always remembering that both the phenomena and sentient beings are to be considered as mere expressions. So the Buddha is always making some kind of correction. So they are benefiting sentient beings. But when we say this, these are the ordinary words of the world. If we look into them, there's only the Buddha nature and the conditionings that are operating. We cannot find sentient beings that have some kind of substantiality. What we find are flows of consciousnesses. And we can say, well, this flow of consciousness is this or that person, but it doesn't have any substantiality, so we need to escape that. So Buddha is always returning to this point, always remembering that both the phenomena and sentient beings are to be considered as mere expressions. Nevertheless, Subhuti, the teaching of the Tathagata are all true, credible, immutable. They are neither extravagant nor chimerical. So what Buddha is explaining is true, credible, immutable, even though he uses words that are immersed in the world. Why? Because he's talking within the language that these consciousnesses can understand. But he's not bounded by the language. The same is true of the attainment of the Tathagatas or the 10 Bhumis. They should be considered as neither realities nor as unrealities. If a Bodhisattva Mahasattva, in practicing charity, conceives within his mind any of these arbitrary conceptions, discriminating himself from other selves, he will be like a man walking in darkness and seeing nothing. So if in the middle of all of this, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva thinks, I am this or I am that, he is arising within a conditioned world, so there are beings, and he is within samsara. This being who is within samsara, he has no chance. He stands no chance. He's going anywhere. He's going nowhere. It's like someone who is in darkness and sees nothing. They are under avidya. They are within a story. It's like someone watching a movie and getting immersed in the movie, and then they suffer, they get happy, they want the movie to go into a certain direction, even though they know that the movie has been concluded and the final will not change, the end of the movie will not change. I think if I ever saw Titanic, I would want Titanic um, not to submerge. I would want people not to die, and then I would, oh no, but they died.
Mahasattva, em sua prática de
But
generosidade,
if the Bodhisattva Mahasattva in his practice of charity has no arbitrary conceptions of the attainment of the blessing and merit which he will attain by such practice, so he's doing directly, clearly what has to be done, then what will happen? People within the conditioned world will look at him and create blessings and merit. Blessing and merit will arise from the conditioned relationships. But this is not the objective of something. He has no objectives. He's like a mirror. He's just seeing things as they are. If the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, instead of walking in darkness and seeing nothing, instead of this, if in his practice of charity has no arbitrary conceptions of the attainment of the blessing and merit, which he will attain by such practice, he will be like a person with good eyes, seeing all things clearly as in the bright sunshine. So here Buddha is describing his own experience. If in future ages there should be any good and pious disciple, either man or woman, able to faithfully observe and study this scripture, his success and attainment of inestimable and illimitable blessing and merit will be instantly known and appreciated by the transcendental eye of the Tathagata. So in Buddhism, there is also a divine eye that sees everything. So what is this transcendental eye of the Tathagata? Inner lucidity sees blessing and merit, but is not fixated by them. So there is this complete lucidity. This is the transcendental eye of the Tathagata, which is Rigpa. We look inwardly and we understand the mind of other beings. So this is the paramita of charity. I think this one is enough. There are 5 others.
da generosidade,
Whoever attains the paramita of generosity or charity enters the first bhumi, and there are 10 bhumis. It's not easy. It's said that it's very difficult to enter the first bhumi. The first bhumi produces happiness. But here, when Buddha explains the bhumis, all bhumis are interconnected. Nobody attains the first bhumi without attaining the others as well. And then there is a second, the practice of selfless kindness, Sila Paramita. Subhuti. When a disciple is moved to make objective gifts of charity, he should also practice the Sila Paramita of selfless kindness. That is, so here can also be called morality. What is morality? He should remember that there is no arbitrary distinction between one's own self and the selfhood of others. So when they practice generosity, so he's giving teachings and helping beings, but he's not thinking, I am here, you are there, my Buddha nature, your Buddha nature. He doesn't think this. He sees directly his own nature as Buddha nature and the nature of others as Buddha nature. A key for this is to recognize that other beings are constructing all the realities in which they are succumbing. So, for example, when we encounter someone in the house, which is not so difficult to find, someone who describes how he or she is in a very difficult situation, we listen to all the words, but we're actually contemplating how the person constructs that reality luminously in a non-discursive way. So in the same way that when we're watching a movie, for example, we may feel fear or anger. That anger is a luminous manifestation. So there isn't somebody saying, now activate anger, now activate fear. Actually, the fear comes, we don't know exactly where it comes from, but it's present. So the luminous mind constructs in a non-discursive and non-cognitive way. It constructs the luminous experience of fear, and the mind itself sees the experience that it created and reverberates these within flows of dependent arising. So when we are faced with someone in this situation, here we don't think, oh, poor being lost in the hell. We think, oh, the other has the same nature that I have, the same Buddha nature that is creating realities. So there is no separation between one and another. And this is the wisdom of equality. If we think that we are here and the other is over there, then there is a break of morality, a rupture of morality. Shubuchi, when a disciple is moved to make objective gifts of charity, he should also practice the Sila Paramita of selfless kindness. That is, he should remember that there is no arbitrary distinction between oneself. So this is the wisdom of equality. Therefore, he should practice charity by giving, not object gifts alone, but the selfless gifts of kindness and sympathy. Here, sympathy you can understand as the ability to put ourselves in the other's shoes. If any disciple will simply practice kindness, he will soon attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So this is so pretty, beautiful to understand. If we're able to manifest by understanding the others and recognizing that their mind is actually our own mind operating in different conditionings, we are actually using a wisdom that overcomes all identities, and we understand how all the multiple beings operate. And so we will attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi very quickly because our mind is now very broad, very vast. It's not operating with the five senses and mind. It's actually seeing the others and ourselves. Shubuchi, by what I have just said about kindness, the Tathagata does not mean that a disciple, when making gifts, should hold in his mind any arbitrary conceptions about kindness. So we're not here saying, oh, he's a fool, but I'm going to manifest kindness for him, but I cannot stand him anymore. My quota of kindness is almost over. We don't have this perspective. We simply manifest it because we're seeing the others as ourselves. So if we see ourselves doing something in an obstacle, we don't say, I'm going to be kind to myself. We just recognize it and we're trying to find a solution. So in the same way, when we look to the other, we see that they are creating problematic things and we try to find a way to overcome it. So when the other overcomes that difficulties, we feel like we have done it. So mind is not in a place. So there are no arbitrary conceptions about kindness. Even though kindness is a word within the ordinary world, there is no fixation to it. For kindness, after all, is only a word, and charity should be spontaneous and selfless, beyond identity. So here, generosity is not even generosity. It's a lucidity that is not attach it to any sensation. It doesn't have to manifest any kind of sensation to manifest. So we are in the paramita of morality, but it has to do with generosity, which is the first perfection. So the Lord Buddha continued, Shubuchi, if a disciple
formando uma elevação tão alta quanto o Monte Sumero, e tantos montes sumeros quanto existem nos bilhões de universos, e doá-los em caridade, seu mérito seria menor do que o que retornaria o discípulo que simplesmente observar e estudar essa escritura, e na bondade do seu coração explicá-la aos outros. Esse último discípulo acumularia bênçãos e méritos.
Sorry, I got lost in the text.
De miríades para um. Nada pode ser comparado a isso. Então não é o número. O que acontece assim, são outros departamentos.
So,
Ficar dentro do mundo, alimentando e
if I
cuidando.
am within the world, nurturing and taking care within the perspective of the world, it's not possible to create any kind of transformation. But here I have a view that moves within the world, uses the language and symbols of the world, but it's completely free from this and actually helps other beings to overcome their limitations. So it's a completely different thing. Lord Buddha continued, do not think, Shubhuti, that the Tathagata would consider within himself, I will deliver human beings. He will not say this. Why? Because he doesn't attribute substantiality to sentient beings. If he did attribute substantiality to sentient beings, then he wouldn't be able to do anything.
E por
That
quê?
would be a degrading thought. Why? Because really there are no sentient beings to be delivered by the Tathagata. So there are Buddhas, non-dual, who operate within flows of minds that arise and cease. In an ordinary language, I can define sentient beings, but if I get fixated on the notion of separativity, substantiality, and permanence of sentient beings, then I'm not able to help them. Should there be any sentient beings to be delivered by the Tathagata, it would mean that the Tathagata was cherishing within his mind arbitrary conceptions of phenomena, such as one's own self, other selves, living beings, and a universal self. So this universal self,
Tensão com outras tradições.
sometimes there is a tension with other traditions, because other traditions sometimes, for example, the Hare Krishna, they think that God is personal, he manifests a physical body.
De
It's
Deus.
the most dense view of God. So here there is some kind of difficulty.
Enquanto
So some traditions have this notion of a universal self or soul as a consciousness somewhere which is different from other consciousness and which talks to other consciousnesses.
Guru,
Still, within the notion of Mahaguru, we could pacify all these views. For example, we could find an inner consciousness, which is the inner Guru, who has lucidity in face of things. And here, we do not consider that the primordial Buddha is somebody. So this notion of a universal self or soul, it's as if it had some individuality.
dual. Então, no
So
budismo,
it's, in Buddhism, we don't have this view.
se nós falarmos de uma universal, a gente vai
If
ter
we
que
talk about a universal self or soul, then we have to talk about the world. There is a universal soul or self and the world. And then the world originates in a tangible and real way. It comes into existence in a tangible way.
Mesmo quando o Tathagata,
Even when the Tathagata refers to himself, he says, I, the Buddha, he is not holding in his mind any such arbitrary thought. So this is what I was explaining. So there is the primordial Buddha. From him, there is Vajrasattva, which is the aspect of the mind that sees how beings get confused. And from Vajrasattva, there are many languages and appearance. That is the Nirmanakaya that enters in contact with the minds in the way that they are operating based on the five senses and helps these consciousnesses to liberate from what they created as something rigid. But when the Buddha arises within this, he is seen as a Buddha, but he himself never gets confused. He never thinks, I am this body, or I am this thought, or I was born from this or that. He always regards himself as this transcendental aspect. So even when the Tathagata refers to himself, he is not holding in his mind any such arbitrary thought. Only terrestrial human beings think of selfhood as being a personal possession.
que só os seres humanos terrestres têm
So only terrestrial human beings have this notion of individuality and existence, of personal existence. And then the Buddha corrects this. Subhuti, even the expression terrestrial beings, as used by the Tathagatas, does not mean that there are any such beings. It's used only as a figure of speech.
terrestres surge.
So the expression terrestrial beings arises together with the notion of identity. It's a construction.
Então, pessoal, nós vamos parar nesse ponto.
So we're going to stop here today.
Tem que sair às
Today I have to leave at 11 o'clock, so right now.
Henrique também já está saindo às 11 horas.
Henrique is also leaving at 11. He has a meeting, but I have other appointments. So I'm gonna let you.
Tem evento que eu não sei.
So today in the afternoon,
Hoje eu não vou ver.
there is an event. There is a game actually of the World Cup.
Fechado, não tem jogo aqui.
I was very disappointed with the last game, so I decided we're not gonna see it today. So whoever wants to suffer in samsara, you can just leave the retreat, go to a bar. Here, this is a serious place.
Eu preciso
So we're gonna keep on meditating, and you can pray for our Brazilian team with no attachment, of course.
Outro dia eu vi.
The other day, I saw some people say, oh, it's easy to win the Koreans. Oh, no, no. Now everybody who has, there is this prejudice against Asians in football. They think,
O Japão tá super bem em Coreia.
but actually Japan is doing very well.
Então, aí hoje de tarde eu vou ter
So today
conversar com
in the afternoon, I have other things to do. I'm gonna talk to a few people. They're gonna travel. Not the people who live here. I don't even talk to them. They're just here all the time. For example, now Renato arrived. He was in Jatavana and couldn't talk to me.
Eu vou conversar com ele.
So I'm gonna talk to a few people.
E depois ele vai conectar com outro e conectar com outro. Eu vou fazer uma filazinha de pessoas.
And then after Renato, there will be other people.
Já tá assim, já tá quase.
No, you don't need it. You're almost there.
Talvez hoje. Ah, é sim.
So that's gonna happen today. If Brazil wins, I will talk to you.
Então tá bom. Não, mas a gente já conversou algumas vezes.
Yeah, but I have talked with Andy a few times before.
Sobre o âmbito
Everything. And
e dos telhados. Assim.
so Lama is talking to some people in the temple.
Então, pessoal,
So bye.
aí vocês sigam.
I'm gonna leave, but you can continue here meditating. Where there's a camera, you're being filmed. We can see you. So we're gonna do the dedication. I'm gonna do the quick dedication. And
Encontros se expandam e toquem a todos, que o Mestre Universal da Paz e da Compaixão, Sua Santidade o Dalai Lama, juntamente com todos os mestres e todas as tradições que veiculam essa mensagem, tenham longa vida, que todos estejam a salvo de gerar pensamentos negativos, o obstáculo mais destrutivo, que esses pensamentos nunca surjam em nossa mente, e que todos os seres também estejam livres de pensamentos negativos. Quem lunte o som, ring lunte, sassun chapar pel dragyo chosun, padang vedrau do som gelencho. Bem assim. Aí eu acho que tem bastante assunto para contemplar.
I
Assim.
think there are many things to contemplate on. So if you want to do shamatha, you can do it. If you want to contemplate what we have studied a lot of things. I think this aspect of generosity and charity and non-self is very interesting. Thank you, everyone.
Pode dar, por favor.